Today we're going to be talking about Samhsa's national campaign, RecoverMe, and looking at how we can implement these materials in our local prevention work in San Diego County. I'm going to walk us through the campaign basics and then do a live demonstration or walkthrough of the toolkit so that everyone can see how to access the resources and utilize them in their efforts. I put a link to the toolkit in the chat. My colleague Joe will send it again in case you're not able to see it. So a little bit about RecoverMe. As I mentioned, RecoverMe is a Samhsa national campaign, and it was designed to specifically support young adults between the ages of 18 to 25. And what makes this campaign unique is that it's really working to address both substance use and mental health together, not separately. Recognizing that for many young adults, these challenges are often interconnected. And the primary goal is to increase the number of young adults that are taking steps towards long-term recovery by giving them practical and accessible resources to support them. So why this age group? Samhsa developed this campaign in response to some new data that found that nearly half of young adults, about 16 million people, reported having either a mental health or a substance use condition in the past year. And what's more concerning is that young adults have the highest unmet need for treatment across both categories. Oftentimes they're facing different unique challenges, whether it's navigating education, new careers, relationships, or even just being independent for the first time. A lot of these factors can be pressures that can complicate accessing help and resources in recovery. So that was designed to meet that specific need. The campaign has 4 different goals. First, it's aiming to raise awareness about how substance use and mental health are connected, and that we can't really effectively address one without addressing the other if both issues are present. Second, it works to improve the belief that recovery is actually possible and that there are a lot of different pathways that can get you there. Third, it actively works towards reducing stigma, which we all know is a very common barrier when looking to get help for substance use or mental health. And finally, it connects young adults to practical resources that they can actually use, and really emphasizing that we're trying to find what works best for every individual and that recovery is not going to be a one-size-fits-all. The campaign has 5 main core messages that are threaded throughout all RecoverMe campaign materials, and I'll just quickly go over what those are. The first is that recovery is framed as a journey and that there's not really a set endpoint or finish line, but it'll be something that you work on continuously. It emphasizes that recovery is going to look different for everyone, which I talked about a little bit earlier, to really try to reduce the pressure that there's, not one specific path that you need to follow to find success or well-being. It consistently addresses both mental health and substance use together to show how they're interconnected. Emphasizes that community support is really an essential component of recovery and that no one's going to recover. Most people aren't going to recover well in isolation. So really the value of community and relationships. And then lastly, the message is always hopeful in all of the campaign materials. So really emphasizing that recovery is possible for everyone. Thinking about recovery and how that connects to our prevention efforts, it really bridges it is a bridge between prevention and recovery messaging. For a lot of young adults that we're probably already working with, some of them might be struggling with substance use or mental health challenges. So this campaign gives us all some high quality materials that can be used without having to go and kind of recreate the wheel, which is really helpful with how time-consuming social media development can be. And the messages align with the continuum of care, looking at prevention through treatment and recovery. And we'll talk a little bit more about some details of this later on in the presentation, but we're hoping that it can help amplify the messaging for the 3 county initiatives as well, that the regional providers amplify in their efforts through the Binge and Underage Drinking Initiative, the San Diego County Substance Use and Overdose Prevention Task Force, and Cannabis Public Health Initiative. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what's in the toolkit before we walk through it. So there's going to be a variety of different materials that are available, including digital assets and content resources. The digital components are going to include social media graphics, different promotional materials that can be utilized at your agency's websites, materials, newsletters, and customizable graphics for local branding. And then as far as content resources, there's multiple pre-written social media posts that are all available in both English and Spanish. Campaign talking points, messaging guidance, and key themes. And all of these materials are designed to be user-friendly and easy to adapt for local implementation. And we're hoping that prevention providers can leverage these resources to further enhance their outreach and engagement efforts without having to recreate content from scratch. And in addition to sharing the slides after today's training, we'll also be sharing an implementation guide that will provide additional resources for you all as you are hopefully able to utilize these materials in your work. So just a few examples of practical implementation about how this might be helpful. And I just mentioned the implementation guide that we'll be sharing after. That goes into a lot more detail of examples of how all of the bullet points listed here can be utilized to support Samhsa's RecoverMe campaign. So you can utilize the RecoverMe materials for your social media through sharing the Samhsa's content directly or adapting the graphics using your agency's branding and local materials. The messaging also works great for community presentations. There's data that's available embedded on the website that I'll walk us through later, some talking points and key messages that are ready to go. You can integrate RecoverMe content into newsletters and website updates through your agencies. And if you're ever doing media interviews about youth substance use or mental health, the campaign provides a lot of current data and uses that hopeful framing that can be really helpful. And you can use these materials for events and share them as educational resources directly with young adults that you're serving as well. And the toolkit, the implementation guide that we'll be sharing goes over that in more details as well to really try to make it simple to use across all the various channels. So now I'm gonna walk us through what's available on the toolkit website and show how you can customize the graphics. I'm just gonna switch my screen over. Okay. So this is the Samhsa RecoverMe Campaign Partner Toolkit website, and the link is in the chat for you all. I'm just going to walk through kind of what's on this page and then show how you can download the graphic and put it into a software such as Canva to customize for your local agencies. So the page starts off with some social media shareables. It has all of the Samhsa social media handles and accounts here to make sure that you're following them or tagging them when you're uploading posts. And it also includes the My Recovery, My Journey hashtag, which Samhsa encourages folks to use when they're posting to just further amplify the message and link all of the different campaign posts together. So this just goes through, there's some different social media graphics that can be used on, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and it also includes some copy that is suggested content for you to post alongside. And then there's a section that has all of the various logos that are available for download. They have them in different color versions depending on the material that you'll be putting it on. And Samhsa also includes branding guidelines, which is really helpful just to make sure that everything is presented in a uniformed way. And you can download all of these various logo files here. And then this section here is where you're going to find the customizable social media graphics. And it does walk you through the different steps, but I'm just going to do a quick demonstration how that might look. If your agency uses, I'm going to show what it would look like on Canva because that's what we utilize, but this would work the same across different platforms if you use Venngage or something else. You would choose which one you wanted to utilize and click the download button and save the image. And then you would go over to whatever design software you wanted to use. Like I mentioned, we use Canva, and you can just select a social media post that pre-sizes it to the various platforms you're going to be using. And then you would just upload the image, size it, and you'll want to make the background a different color or leave it white, but this will show up here. And then in this space is where you can put your customized branding. I'll use the county logo as an example. And then it's as simple as that. You would be ready to download the post and you can utilize the sample copy. So it's really simple for you to get it ready to go and posted. And then I did just want to mention if people aren't aware, Canva, if your agency is a nonprofit, offers free Canva Pro subscriptions. You just have to verify your nonprofit status. So that might be something useful if your agency doesn't currently have access to a design software. And then there's just a few more resources on here. They have a shareable badge that you can utilize to put on any promotional materials or websites to demonstrate your agency's commitment to supporting young people on their recovery journey. And then they have a campaign one-pager that you can download that just kind of goes over the campaign overview materials that I talked about earlier. This could be helpful if you wanted to just get your staff on board or more aware of what the campaign is about. And then lastly, there's a sample newsletter content that you could use to amplify the Samhsa RecoverMe campaign in a newsletter format as well. So that's kind of a quick overview, and there's all of this information and more details in the implementation guide we'll share as well. I'm just gonna get my slides back up here. Okay. So just a quick recap, the toolkit is completely free to use. They really tried to make it as easy to navigate and user-friendly as possible. And the materials are all designed with local customization in mind, having placeholders for where you can put your agency logos and branding. And really encourage you all to make sure that you include local resources. We'll go over some examples in a few slides, and then any additional ones that might be more specific to your region would be great to include as well. And all content is available both in English and Spanish, and you don't need any permissions to use the materials. They're all open resource and available to the public, so you're able to utilize them in whatever capacity is most helpful. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about local implementation. As I mentioned earlier, we're really hoping that these pre-made campaign materials can be utilized to support, your messaging related to the 3 countywide initiatives. And I'll go over a few examples of what that might look like. For BUDI, maybe it would be something about talking about young adults navigating alcohol use and how recovery can include building healthier relationships with drinking and finding support and making choices that feels right for every individual. And really looping back to that recovery is possible messaging. For the Substance Use and Overdose Prevention Task Force, maybe the connection would look something like talking about the co-occurring challenges of mental health and substance use, and that recovery is available for both, and maybe touching on some harm reduction or risk reduction practices as well. And then, as I mentioned, making sure that we include resources with all campaign materials that we'll be posting. I have some examples of local resources that might be helpful to include here. And we encourage you all to include additional local resources that might be more specific to your neighborhood or the audience that you're hoping to reach with your posts. So some key takeaways, RecoverMe, the Samhsa RecoverMe campaign is really looking to address the unique recovery needs of young adults by connecting mental health and substance use support and addressing them together. The toolkit resources are all free, ready to use, and based on evidence-based materials. We encourage the providers and folks on this call to coordinate messaging across county initiatives and make sure that we're using campaign hashtags to connect with the national conversation. And the implementation guide we'll be sharing will offer additional practical next steps for getting started, making it hopefully as easy as possible for providers to integrate RecoverMe into existing work. And excuse me, before I turn it over to Bernard, just a few steps that might be helpful for getting started. We would recommend, first taking another look at the toolkit website and getting familiar with the materials available there. Spend some time looking at the implementation guide that we'll provide. It'll include additional messaging recommendations, additional ready-to-use social media templates and copy, and to just really maybe focus on 2 to 3 materials to get started with that address different priorities that your agency is focusing on currently. Remembering to customize with local branding and resources to really make them the most useful. And then, once you kind of feel familiar with all of that, start sharing them across your social media channels. It should really be a simple process, but if along the way anything feels tricky, our team is here and we're happy to help with anything from understanding the materials or figuring out how to use Canva or software like that as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bernard, who's going to be discussing best practices for integrating lived experience into our RecoverMe messaging and just messaging in general.
Good morning, everybody. I hope that it is as beautiful where you are as it is here, because I'm looking out my window and it's just incredible. So to have the opportunity to share this information with you is it's a privilege for me. And I hope that it's something that you can take back with you and that you can utilize in your efforts to make our community safer and have recovery treatment more accessible, especially to the youth. So the name of this presentation, which actually comes from a great workshop that was put on by Maya Shahar back in June, which was the Substance Use Recovery Storytelling Workshop. It comes from that, but it also comes from my experience. Believe it or not, there was a time when I had a lot more hair that was a lot darker. My standard line, 50 pounds and a lot more hair ago, I was a television news reporter. So I've told numerous stories. I've been exposed to a lot of different situations. So I'm trying to incorporate some of my experiences into the great training that was provided by Maya called Share Your Story through the Megan Perry Group. Inviting people to share their recovery stories, a respectful approach. We might think that inviting people to tell their story is as simple as saying, hey, wow, that's really impactful. You've got a great story. Why don't you tell people? But stories, as you probably all know, because we all have a story, stories are very personal. And what you choose to reveal and what you choose and how you choose to reveal it is something that is very personal to you. If you don't know how to approach someone, you're going to try to shape their story in a way that makes sense to you as opposed to them. And what we're really trying to do here is give people the opportunity to share in such a way that it has impact on their lives as well as the people who they're trying to impact as well. So we can go to the next slide, Sarah. I'd appreciate it. Was there one in between, Sarah, that I had asked you to put there?
I think I might have done it out of order. We'll go to that
There
one
you go.
first.
Okay. So, like I said, there was an old television show called The Naked City back in the 60s. And their motto was, there are 8 million stories in the naked city. And every day in our newspapers and our televisions and our radios and our social media, in whatever way you receive your news, you're going to find stories that have to do with recovery or the harmful effects of not recovering. This story was just out today. I saw it on Apple News, and I thought that I would just show you the headline. It's through The Guardian, and it says, "Drugs quieted my inner loathing." Todd Marinovich on the NFL addiction and the power of art. So this young man, if you're not familiar with him, was actually raised in Orange County, California, just up the road. And he was a number one recruit in the entire country. His father was a former National Football League football player, and he put his son through an incredible regimen of preparation for the NFL. But through this process and through this young man's uh, experience of not particularly wanting to be an NFL football player, but having more of an artistic uh, path that he wanted to pursue, he had a lot of mental health issues, a lot of that led to substance use issues. And despite that, he was able to excel. But through his excelling, the more that he excelled, the more exposure he had to substances, and the more he tried to hide behind those substances, and it led to his downfall as not only an NFL player, but as someone whose story was disseminated across the United States. People had the picture of him as a loser, and all he was trying to do was to hide his pain through substance use, and then try to recover from that pain by not using substances. So he has a book out now, and the interesting thing about this book, if you are to read this article, is how much they focus on the pain and not nearly as much on the recovery. And I thought that was very sad for him, because obviously the book allows him to continue to make an income, but it takes away a lot now from his goal, which is to help other people in recovery. So storytelling is very, very important. Storytelling is an immensely important aspect to all of the efforts that you make, because we can put all the information and data out in front of people, but unless they connect it to somebody who has a story that they can relate to, or that they can empathize with, or that they can utilize themselves to help others, it probably won't have as much impact. So these stories are out there every day in every way, and we can utilize those stories if we do it with a respectful approach. Can we go to the next slide, please, Sarah? Thank you. So we're going to talk about ethical principles, core values for engagement. You know, what are those core values? We're going to give you some ideas: how to build trust and mutual respect, respect privacy and personal agency. You know, sometimes we want to hear more. Tell me more. Tell me more. What else happened? How did you get out of that? Oh my gosh, how did you end up there? But those people may not be willing to tell you those things at this point, or they may not have processed it in such a way that they're able to share it in a way that you may want to hear, or that your audience may want to hear. So we have to respect the fact that it's their story, not our story. We also want to talk about avoiding tokenism. Oh, they're just a drug addict, so this is how drug addicts do things, and this is what they have to go through. And the biggest one is, well, they've got to hit bottom before they can come back up. Well, everybody's bottom's different. Some people never hit a bottom. Some people just stay in the same place the whole time. So there are 8 million stories in the Naked City, 8 million paths to recovery. And so we have to avoid tokenism to get to the real story of recovery. This one, ethical principles, sometimes people want to cut deals. Never promise special treatment. Hey, if you do this story, I'll give you a Starbucks, whatever, but you've got to do the story in the way that I want you to do it. No, never promise special treatment. This is their story. This is, again, heading back to personal agency. It is their way to tell the story. And then if it's appropriate, offer fair compensation. Now, people think, well, compensation, so you're going to give them money, or are you going to give them, access to some special thing like a week in a hotel or something like that? Compensation can be a lot of different things. It can be, hey, you know what? We'll do this presentation in front of the group that you have an attachment to. That would be your compensation. So offer fair compensation, things that trade off in a way that isn't disrespectful or just trading off in order to hear what you want to hear. So if there is going to be compensation, make sure that it's appropriate. So those are some ethical principles that you can start to build a foundation on as you go forward with approaching people about telling their stories. Next slide, please. Okay, so setting that foundation. When someone approaches you, and there are going to be a million ways that people come to you. You'll either see somebody who you've been introduced to, or they've told their story to a different group, or they may just come to you and say, hey, I think I'm ready to tell this story. Or, if I wanted to tell my story, how would I do it? So you want to know what your purpose is within your particular agency. Be clear about why you're collecting stories and how they'll be used. Through the substance use um, overdose prevention team or task force, we did a series when we were known as the Meth Strike Force and PDATF, Prescription Drug Abuse Task Force. We did a series of stories called Voices of Hope. And through those stories, we were very clear about, why we were going to collect those stories. And it was in the title. It was called Voices of Hope, not voices of all the crap you went through and, oh my gosh, how did you swim through that swamp? It was very specific to, we want people to hear hope. And so when you do your stories or when you approach people about stories, really understand what your purpose is in wanting to share those stories and how they'll be used. How will those stories be used? Will they be published? Will they be videotaped? Will they be disseminated on the internet? Will they be only in front of a group of people? Know how they'll be used so that you can explain this to people as you approach them about possibly doing their stories, or if they approach you. Um, Tailor your approach. Focus on strengths, resilience, and transformation, not just trauma. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. But we want to focus on strength. And this was something that was really emphasized during the storytelling workshop that we did back in June. It was a wonderful look at how stories can lead people to recovery by not focusing on those stereotypical things, but focusing on the things that brought them to the other side of recovery, from that situation where they felt hopeless to the place where they felt hopeful. And that avoided, you don't want to avoid the trauma, but you don't want to make the trauma the focal point. You want to make strength the focal point, resilience and transformation the focal point. And as you go through your initial approach, I would hope that you would bring that into your purpose. That would be part of your definition of purpose. And the other thing would be to make sure that you're leveraging existing community relationships and credibility by partnering with those trusted organizations that you work with, so that you can start to make contacts with people who might tell their stories. So Sarah just went through a whole list of various organizations, community-based groups that you could partner with in order to start to cultivate these stories. I know SUOPT recently did a faith-based seminar with a lot of community leaders from the faith community, where they shared stories, they shared information about recovery, they shared information about some of the substances that are now plaguing our communities and how to work with the youth, especially as it relates to these things. So partnering with trusted organizations is a very important aspect to this. Next slide, please. Okay, so creating a safe environment. When you collaborate with people, you're going to be developing a relationship. And as you develop this relationship, you want to make sure that it's in such a way that people feel safe. So knowing what their experience is, a little bit about their experience, knowing what makes them feel safe goes a long way in building trust. What we learned in the substance use recovery storytelling workshop, and was really an eye-opener to me, is that there really are no completely safe places, but there are safer places. And by that we mean that you have a place where people can come and talk to you and not have to worry about are other people listening, or are people listening who will take my story and then transport it somewhere else where I don't want it to be. So you want to make sure that the environment that they're in is one in which they understand that they're free to tell their story in the way that they want to tell it, and that you're willing to listen by creating a psychological safety zone, by building trust through empathy and non-judgment. And that's a hard one to do because building empathy and non-judgment has to be genuine. It has to not. It's not just something that say, okay, well, I'm just not going to say anything so they think I'm empathetic and that I'm not being judgmental. You really have to put yourself in that mindset where you're willing to listen, and not only to listen, but to try to understand what you're being told, so that your interpretation is what the storyteller wants you to hear. So creating that safe environment is really a great way to do that, and it's a difficult thing to do, but it can be done as you become more clearly understanding of what a person is trying to impart to you. Communicate clearly, be transparent about how stories will be shared and who will see them. Know ahead of time through your foundation, how you want to use these stories and how you want to disseminate them, or who will see them, because the person needs to know. They're putting themselves out there not only in front of someone who they can see, but in the unseen, the unknown. So they need to understand who will be seeing their stories, especially for young people who may not have a lot of trust. They haven't built trust through their experiences. And in fact, they may have built a whole lot of distrust because of what they've been through, what they've put themselves through, or what others have put themselves through. So being honest and open and telling them who you're going to share the story with will help build that trust. And also not cause any kind of confusion about, well, I didn't know this is how this was going to be used. Well, we did talk about this extensively. Support the narrator. Check in regularly. Respect their comfort level throughout. Hey, are you feeling okay? Are you all right to go there? Okay, well, thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that. That's really impactful. Not by being patronizing, but by being genuine as you listen to their story. And then respect boundaries, that area where you say, tell me more. Well, the storyteller always controls what they share and when. And you'd be amazed if you just let people talk. And if you're a genuinely interested listener, you'd be amazed at how much people will be willing to tell you, as opposed to you prodding them to tell the story the way that you want to hear it. So during this collaboration, a lot of this will just take place organically, but please be aware that you want to create a safe environment, not only physically, but psychologically. You want to communicate clearly, support the narrator, and respect boundaries. Can we go to the next slide, please? So let's talk about story components. And I know all this is going very quickly, and I'm sure Maya can tell you that can lead you to the place where you can get access to the storytelling seminar. Some of those products that were given to us during that seminar are probably still available to you through the county. So Maya, if you could put that in the chat if you have it, that would be great. If not, we can make this available to you also. But story components, what are the elements of a strong story? Well, that trauma is what happened. What happened? But it doesn't have to be the focal point. Well, I'd gotten hurt in sports when I was in high school, and I was exposed to opiates, and the next thing I knew, I was having difficulties. Well, what shifted? When did something happen? Well, we did a story with one individual who spent a lot of time on the street and in prison, and now finds himself as very successful as an author. And we asked the question, when did something shift? When did something happen? And we always think there's going to be some line of delineation. And he said, I don't know when it shifted. I don't know when the change happened. All I know is that it happened. And so be willing to hear the fact that maybe they don't know some things, but they know something happened. So, ask them in that at some point, say, can you tell me about the turning point? And then ask about strength. What helped you move forward? These are things that they'll be putting out there themselves, and maybe they'll even be discovering along the way as you're helping them by guiding the conversation in such a way that gives them agency, in such a way that it gives them an opportunity to talk about their turning point, their strength, and their hope. How do things look now? How do things look now? And then make sure that they're aware and you're aware of who this audience is for. If it's for younger teens, you probably, and you have someone who just is a prolific swearer, you probably don't want to, probably want to make them aware, hey, this is for younger teens. And so we don't want a lot of swearing, a lot of colorful language, but we do want the story if you're able to tell it in such a way. Or maybe it's for an older audience, for parents who may not understand what their young adult is going through. But make sure they know who this story is for. And make sure you know who the story is for. And then other components, what to avoid. Doing the blame game, blaming others, glorifying substance use. Well, it was my parents' fault. They kept drugs in the medicine cabinet, and man, I felt so good when I would use those drugs. I would just go into another world, and I wouldn't have to worry about them. Trauma dumping. I went through this, and I went through that, and I went through this, and I went through that, and that's the whole story. Everything I went through, but nothing about recovery, nothing about hope, nothing about self-awareness in that recovery process. And then oversharing graphic details. There was I got into a fight, and the next thing I knew there were weapons, and the next thing I knew there were gory detail, gory detail, gory detail. Those are not things you want to glorify. What you want to focus on is the hope, the recovery, the turning point. So I would encourage you to stay away from those things that we need to avoid: blame, glorifying substance use, trauma dumping, or oversharing details. They are part of the story, but they are not the whole story. Next slide, please. So here's an example that was, there are lots of great videos on Unshamed California. This is just one of them. And we'll probably have to take it all the way back to the beginning, Sarah. So if you put the little red dot at the bottom and scroll all the way to the left, we can hear from the beginning.
In some pretty dark.
Yeah, just slide the red dot with your cursor all the way to the left, and it'll go from the beginning.
Not to be ashamed. I've ended up in some pretty dark places, but it's possible to change. It is possible to love yourself. It is possible to have a whole completely different life for the good. From a young age, I did not feel like I fit in. I didn't feel like I was a part of. I didn't really start talking to 5th grade. And when I did, I had a stuttering problem. I always got picked on because I loved animals and I would do anything, and I'd bring home all these strays all the time. And, just it masked until it didn't mask anymore, and then it was like I needed it. And then the obsession and everything else came in. I've been to so many treatment facilities, and at the time, I probably wasn't ready or in the right mind to accept the help that they were giving. Oh, my recovery journey. It's different. Right now it's faith-based, which never in a million years I think I would turn to God, but I did almost 5 months ago now. There's just so many things that I do now to stay sober. I'm still seeing a therapist, a drug and alcohol therapist. I'm seeing a Christian-based therapist, and I have a life coach. I mean, like, just anything I can get my hands onto, I'm grabbing and I'm using it to the best that I can, because it's definitely rocky. Just because you get sober doesn't mean like life stops happening. I am friendly. I like talking. I'm very outgoing. I'll go and meet anybody. Now, like even in the beginning of my recovery, like you couldn't get me to talk, but I just feel like being a light in someone, or just even saying hi to someone or putting your hand out to them, makes somebody makes their day shine. And I don't know, I'm positive. I want people to feel what I'm feeling. I want people to see that there is hope out there and that they don't have to give up on themselves. Just reach out to other people, because you don't know what the other people are going through. You don't know what they have or what they don't have. And, just by showing up and having a simple conversation with someone could change someone's life,
Great stories. As we get into the next slide, it's oversharing versus intentional storytelling. I'm going to focus on the intentional storytelling here. In this particular piece, it was very audience aware and purposeful. Obviously, she was very reflective and thoughtful. It was consent-based. It was her share, her choice. And it does acknowledge the pain throughout the piece, but it highlighted her strength and her growth. And I think that is so powerful when you're able to point to the result of all the various ways that she has processed her recovery. And so that was very intentional storytelling. And you'll find a lot of those examples on Unshamed California. And you can do those same things. We basically just use an iPhone, a very inexpensive lavalier mic, and iMovie editing program to produce the Voices of Hope videos that we did for SUOPT. And so you can do the same thing, but you must be aware of intentional storytelling as opposed to oversharing. And then the last couple things I want to talk about, protecting the storyteller. We talked about safe places and making sure that the storyteller knows that they're safe. Safeguarding well-being. Don't overuse one person's story. Avoid repeatedly asking the same individual, because when they tell these stories, they're actually having to relive the whole different aspects of their story. Hopefully, that's the positive things that they're reliving more and more, and it's emphasizing that to them. But they do have to delve into the trauma that they might have gone to as well in order to get to that recovery aspect of it. So, using one person's story is good, but it would be good to have a stable of stories that reflect a variance of different recovery paths and personality types and circumstances, if it's possible. Protect confidentiality, ensure the privacy of others mentioned in their story. Oh, my mother, Edna Smith was such an whatever, and you don't want to do that because we think of the person going through substance use or mental health issues as being the only person who's in pain, but obviously we all know that that pain ripples out across a large swath of family and friends and coworkers and even into the community in some instances. Just like with the Todd Marinovich story, it started with his own pain, rippled out to his family, rippled out to the community that he was a part of, rippled out to his professional coworkers, and so on and so forth. Prepare for reactions. Discuss the possibility of adverse responses or distressing comeback. You've been in the room sometimes when somebody's trying to share responsibly, but there's always that person or persons who will come back and say, yeah, well, I don't believe that. Yeah, well, that doesn't work for me. They're gonna be negative, or they're going to create some kind of a distressing thing. Be ready for that by having answers prepared, such as, well, I'm sorry that you went through that. I hope that changes for you, but we appreciate the sharing that was done by our storyteller tonight. And then provide content warnings. We all have heard that disclaimer. We're about to show some images that may provoke a response in you. Please be warned. When sharing stories publicly, include appropriate disclaimers. And then last slide. after the story, oh, we just did that one. I didn't realize that was back to back. I'm sorry. Oh, no. Next slide. I'm sorry. Yeah, there we go. After the story, follow up and support. Don't just leave the person hanging. Hey, how you doing? Just wanted to let you know how it went. We got a lot of great response. Maybe in a few months, would you be willing to do this again? Do you want to redo your story in some way? But follow up and support. Debrief with the storyteller. How did it feel? What support do they need? Do you need to retell your story? Do you need to reshoot that video? Do you need to redo that audio recording? Or do you just need somebody to talk to? Can we point you in the direction of someone who might give you some support? Maintain a connection, check in periodically, share how the story made an impact. Give credit, acknowledge their contribution publicly, of course, with their permission. And then create ongoing opportunities, invite them to share in other settings if they're interested. Now, the one thing I didn't mention was really an interesting situation. We had a situation with SUOPT, and I don't think Marla will mind me sharing this, but we had an individual who called us for advice about her daughter's story. And her daughter's story was a very difficult story. The daughter had passed away, but this woman wanted to help others avoid her daughter's plight, but she became very possessive of the story and wanted help in such a way that she wanted to make her daughter's story the center of everybody's story. And so we had to remind her that, hey, we respect your story and we respect the fact that you want to help, but we can't be with you every day of every week, helping you with your path. This is something you have to navigate yourself, but we'll help you by leading you to different aspects of the community where you might get mental health help, or you could get your own, get involved with the stories that you want to tell to the appropriate audiences. She became very possessive of using us for telling her story. So you have to be careful of that and make sure that the storyteller respects your role as well. So, luckily she understood in the end and was still able to go on and do the things that were important to her and respect to her daughter. But we also had to make sure that she knew that there were boundaries as far as what we could do as well and how we could approach her situation. So with that, that is it. I wanted to also let you know that on the Samhsa website, let me see if I can, I don't think you'll be able to see it, but I just want to let you know that on the Samhsa website, under the lived experience section that was shown to you earlier, there are guidelines that they list there. They're very good ethical guidelines for lived experience integration. Always required guidelines, key questions about personal stories, and then things to avoid. So, so you can find that there as well. So I thank you for your commitment to ethical storytelling.